let's go ahead and get this kicked off. We got everybody going in the chat as well. So welcome in everybody. I'm Dylan from RevOps Co-op. Today we are going to be talking through a blueprint for doing annual sales planning the right way. We have a hell of a lineup for y'all to talk through this. So Werner, I want to kick it over to you, kind of run through introductions and get things going.
That'd be great. So Dylan, thanks very much. So let me share my screen, and you should be able to see my screen now. Does it come up? All good, great. A thumbs up. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. We've got a great panel to talk to you about annual planning and really doing it the right way. So we'll probably ask, well, let me introduce everyone first and on our panel, and then we can explain why we're talking about annual planning in June. So first off, myself, I'm a co-founder CEO of Lative. But been in RevOps 20 plus years, spent a lot of time, and most of the reason why I don't have much here is because of annual planning. And everything that goes with it. With that, I'll let George introduce himself, and then Jeff.
Hi everyone, I'm George. So I've been in a number of RevOps roles in a number of companies, and I started off with bigger companies and then moved to startups. And so I've been able to see really good practices for annual planning, learn from that. But I like to say I've learned mostly from my mistakes, the things I've screwed up along the way. And so if I can impart any wisdom I gained from that for today's crowd, I will. So it's great to be here.
All right. My name is Jeff Ignacio. I'm head of growth and operations at RegrowAg. We're a climate tech agriculture-based supply chain. We're hoping to work on decarbonizing the agricultural supply chain. In my off time, I run a bunch of RevOps content through a Substack podcast and facilitate the courses here at the RevOps Co-op, which I hope you check out.
Great, thanks Jeff, and thanks George. Okay, so let's just if the clicker works. This one, so there we go. Okay, so the agenda we're going to run through. Why are we talking about planning now in June? Well, first off, we wanted to do this in early June because we know what, if you run in calendar fiscal, we know what the back half of June's like, and didn't want to take time away from there because it's a very busy time of year before we start in the summer holidays, and certainly more so in the July 4th holidays in the US. So we wanted to talk about this, and why? Because if we're not starting to think about annual planning as you get into July, you're probably a bit behind, especially if you're running your fiscal year, calendar year, because July and August is really when you want to starting to think about planning and thinking about who the people need to be involved. And we're going to talk to you a lot about that in the next say 50 minutes or so. And then so that's the benefits of the structured revenue planning process and why it's important. We're going to talk a bit about setting goals and expected outcomes. What those mean and what those outcomes need to be. Very important is what the outcomes you expect to achieve once you've done your annual process. So you get those, up front and center before you get into it. And we're going to spend most of the time discussing, the autonomy of a good planning process. But what were the lessons learned, like George said? What do we learn along the ways, and what are the pitfalls to maybe avoid, or what are the tactics that you can use as we go forward? For any sales organization, any company that has a sales organization, you need to do plan. There needs to be some form of a plan put in place, and goals set of what you expect in the years to come. And it's how we do that. We'll decide if it's been a good planning process or not. And ultimately, a good planning process means we start to hit our numbers. Okay, annual revenue planning, calendar, and timeline. So just some things to think about as you put your calendars together and what that timeline should look like. It's quite high level, and then we're going to give you some assets afterwards from the session that can help you with that. Communication and change management. I know it's something that we probably hear a lot, that we don't talk enough about it, but it is absolutely critical to a good planning process. Without communication, and certainly without the change management, it's unlikely that your planning process is going to be important. So we'll spend a little bit of time there and just some ideas or thoughts about what you could be doing to drive change management within the organization and communicate enough. And if you think you're communicating enough, continue communicating because it's probably not enough. And then key deliverables, just some of the deliverables that you need to think about. Okay, so I'm going to let George talk to this quote, which is, I think does a great job summing up the planning process.
Yeah, I think that Dwight Eisenhower was known to be a master logician and planner and strategist, and it's one of the reasons why he was so important during World War II and why he became president. And the message we have today for everyone is, don't just think about the plan itself. I think we tend to think about the plan being this deck we come up with, a set of spreadsheets we work with, finance, and we say, what's the plan number? Think first, like what Werner was saying about the process itself. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you have a good framework and process that carries you not only this year, but then next year people are going to be familiar with it. And you'll just continue to iterate on it as you grow. There are a lot of smaller companies I know participating in the call today. And what I can say is you should start this from the very beginning within your company. You can always strip it down to its basic elements, but having a structured framework is going to really serve you well to always have a good, thoughtful plan and a thoughtful process on how you produce your plan.
Thanks, George. And Jeff, with that in mind, where it comes to really setting the goals and those expected outcomes, we'd love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, George, really timely with the Ike 80th anniversary D-Day planning. I always say this, there's a quote from Richard Cushing, always plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So when you're building your plan for the following year, you want to get ahead. So there are 3 key pillars to our planning and our goal setting. The first is really to align those goals to the leadership's team, the leadership team's goals, and then from there turning it into planning and process, getting those executive initiatives in motion. The second is to really put in clear writing, what those expected outcomes are going to be. How do you measure them, right? It's not enough to say we want to grow this year. You want to be very specific and prescriptive to the entire business, and figure out which levels of detail you need that is actionable across the different levels of the org. And then third, you want to be able to look ahead, right? So it's one thing to go rafting down the river, but you want to plan and anticipate, where those big rocks are going to be up ahead. So identify those challenges, those roadblocks, and then develop a strategy to overcome them or mitigate them as much as possible.
Nice, Jeff. So getting into then the autonomy of a good planning process, and this is where we're going to spend most of our time now, and lessons learned of what was, what's good, what's bad. We're going to talk about some stories. We'd love some comments in the chat as we do this. But really, what's the impact to the organization when you get it wrong? Because these exercises consume a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of just pure brain power of coordination, systems, and tools. There's just so many people involved that it's the ripple effect of what happens from when you've got the plan of what then needs to happen. So it's important to understand that across the organization of what it involves, and then some thoughts on the tactics to avoid. Of some sometimes some simple tools that have been out there for a while of what can be used if everyone's clear on Eracy, for example, and so forth. So a bit of an eye chart, but I'll let everyone can read that while we stay on this slide. But I think George, probably starting with you, if that's okay. As we start to think about clear roles and responsibilities, we are in any corporate organization we're in. If we don't have it, what's bad? Well, there's gaps and overlaps and responsibility, accountability, and so forth. But from your perspective and maybe some examples of what you've experienced, why is clear roles and responsibilities number one on this slide?
Yeah, and I think here's an example I'd love to hear in the chat. Anybody who wants to say, yep, that happened to me, or something different. But we've probably all been in the position as RevOps leaders where there's a board meeting, and we've created a deck. Either we were in the board meeting or our CRO came back and said, we kind of screwed up. My numbers weren't aligned with the CFO's numbers, and there was confusion there. And it almost always traces to the fact that there was a gap or overlap in who's responsible for reporting those numbers in that meeting and who's responsible for making sure those numbers are aligned. And it can be a big problem. It really erodes confidence. I've seen it also happen in company meetings too, where basically all employees have come away a bit confused. And so Adobe was the company I worked with that really helped me understand the value of a good planning process. But also when I was there, we put in place, we used a RACI matrix. Some of you might know it as a DACI matrix. It just says, hey, who's responsible and who's accountable for each part in the process. And I can't say more about how valuable that is. And then the thing I would say I learned was, leave your ego at the door, because oftentimes in RevOps, we say, we should orchestrate this process. It was in my job description, but you may have somebody in FP&A or finance who feels like it's their job. It's less important on who does it as it is to make sure it gets done, that there's no gap. And it's really important to know that if two people or more than that are working on one thing, or one set of numbers, they're in alignment, and it's by design.
And Jeff, love some examples of what you've seen when you get those roles and responsibilities wrong.
So the one thing about planning is you want to start early, and the earlier you start, the better opportunity you have to get the right people in the right place, paying attention to the specific areas of the business where they can help. So for example, we want to be able to identify, what the product roadmap launch is going to be. We want to rally our product marketing and our sales enablement folks to be in tune with what that roadmap release is going to look like. Then from there, ops and finance can start to identify, what's the percentage of TAM that we're going to open up, and then plan accordingly. Are we going to incorporate this and roll this out to the rest of the sales floor in a general selling model? And if so, how do we create a work backwards plan to make sure that everyone is prepared on Jan 1 to be able to speak to the new messaging, the new features, the new product? So the clear lanes of responsibility, everyone has a role to play, from something as small as a product feature being released to something large where everyone has their own specific role. So sales reps going out and hitting the messaging, ops making sure that we're tuning our systems, new SKUs, our CPQ, our contracting, our quoting, our finance teams prepared with pricing and deal desk. So we want to make sure that all the roles and responsibilities are tied and held hand to hand when we move through each stage of the planning process.
Jeff, it's so interesting as you talk, it's this, you just mentioned starting with product, and that's one team. And then there's, okay, well, how do we get that across? George, you're talking about finance, that's another team. You've got the marketing team, you've got the sales team. I mean, already you've probably got about 8 to 12 people involved in just one part of part of that planning process. Jeff, you then go into territory plan, it's RevOps, it's systems, it's tools. And you can see how fast this starts to require a number of people within the organization to be involved. And my experience too, but we've run it where you hire the wrong, not hire, but you find the person that you think should be it within another function that you don't know too well. And you find out actually that was the wrong person, and for 1 month you've lost time because there wasn't the right person. They weren't at the right level within the organization to make decisions, and things slowed down. And if one part slows down, it can have a domino effect across the others. So 100% agreeing with you, Jeff, and George, just that and making sure you get those roles and responsibilities right, and who it is. With the right level of autonomy within those functions, because it's cross collaboration, is really important. And I think what George said is also very important. It's ownership is important, and we all love to own the work and get it done. But it's important to be delegating if you're going to have a successful plan. And as George said, it's as long as the work gets done. Doesn't matter who's doing it. And that comes back to setting these clear roles and responsibilities. So I'm a big fan of our RACI matrix. Some people love them or hate them, but honestly, even if you just take the first part, just do the RACI, just who the people are. and what is that RACI, and just have it as a visual on the slide so everyone's clear. It honestly does get rid of a lot of that confusion.
I think you hit the
Okay.
nail on the head too, Werner, with something which is, you use the word decisions. We keep thinking about like who's responsible for activity or actions. I would implore everybody here to think about having your team, your planning team, and understanding who's empowered to make decisions. And if somebody can't, if for instance, the CFO can't show up to a meeting, the person that goes for them is their proxy and able to make decisions or come back very quickly, like here's when the decision will be made, because that can really slow down the process. And then making it very clear, if you're orchestrating this process, here's not only what actions we need to take, but here's the decisions we need to make in the meeting or coming out of it. And, you know, a matrix like RACI or DACI can help you with that too. So it's a good way of streamlining the process, empowering people to make decisions, and stop the whole cycle of second guessing and going through multiple revision cycles.
I think that's going to leads into, you know, setting clear deadlines with critical dependencies outlined, because now it's okay, great, now we've got the people and we know that, but what are the deadlines that we need to hit to ensure that we're going to be on time to, you know, roll out quotas or comp plans and territories on 1st of January or 1st of February or whatever, you know, whatever the beginning of your fiscal is. But you know, to that point, you start missing deadlines, and the domino effect happens. You don't get comp plans out, you don't get quotas out, and the impact to the organization is really big, and especially to sales organizations, because it's frustrating knowing that you've got to carry on saying you don't know what your territory is, or you don't know what how you're going to get paid. I mean, I've got examples, you know, where we've got comp plans out in March, and that's not a happy place to be in when you're at the end of the first quarter and you're only getting your comp plans out to your sales organization. And that was driven because even though the deadlines were in there, we weren't clear on the dependencies for those. And to George's point as well, and to what Jeff is saying, if you don't have those right decision makers in place that can make the decisions, or that cause the delays, or you haven't got things signed off, that's what happens. And I think, you know, with that, George, I'd love to hear, you know, actually, sorry, Jeff, I'll start with you. Just, you know, examples of missing those deadlines, you know, through an annual planning process, and the impacts that happen with, you know, within your you know, the teams you've supported in the past.
So at AWS, we started planning in April, right? And that was really pre-planning. That's showing everyone the calendar throughout the rest of the year. And those dates somewhat fluid, you know, that early in April, but it aligns everyone to get their minds thinking, this is the role I'm going to play during the planning process. And these are the discrete phases. And then in other organizations, you might start in June or July, sometimes August. Now, if you're starting in October, November, you know, that you're not leaving yourself a whole lot of grace and enough runway, because what ends up happening is these discrete blocks, there are some massive decisions that need to be made along the way, because the following year versus this year, you might have some massive deltas. So you might be changing your personas, you might be going up market, you might be changing your pricing. So some of these big rocks in your way that you anticipate for the following year, you want to give yourself enough time to start that planning motion. And by essentially treating planning as one large program with several projects underneath it, you can then see that one outcome of a project, maybe it's segmentation, maybe it's territory design, there's a dependency downstream from it. So every single part of the planning process where you're running a little bit late, you might be impacting other dominoes in the planning motion. Now, as much as possible, you want to parallel track these as much as possible, but there are certain things that are just one after the other, right? Segmentation, territory design, quota design, comp planning. So you can see very quickly that if you're missing one block, you're really pushing timelines out for some other important critical work streams.
And George, just, you know, if you can give us an example with, well, I know quotas and comps with the story that you told me before, and the impacts being issued in May. But what that actually led to when it started to be you're missing bookage numbers, and which then has much larger impacts on the organization and what happens to the sales teams, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback. I totally agree with what Jeff said. Interesting to hear, Jeff, you say that at AWS you started in April. I think the calendar we're presenting really sort of sees the process starting in August here. And I've had so much time like where there's been pushback to say that's planning way too early. We're small. We need to be nimble, move fast. But to all the points Jeff made, there's so many interdependencies, and comp plans rely on all of that stuff. The segmentation, the go-to-market strategy. Are you focused on expansion or new business? Where do you put your strategic focus? That it follows that. And if that stuff's not in place by really like November, you don't have time to get those comp plans done. And the impact I've seen, like some of the examples of, I've seen it even as late as April. And one time I came into an organization, it was May, and they were still putting them out, is they were way behind because comp and compensation plans are economics in action. And a core principle is people respond to incentives. So one of the things I've done frequently as a RevOps leader, and I know there are a lot of other people do, is you actually put like a spiff in the first quarter to try to get people to hit their number in that first quarter, so you come out of the gate strong. Well, if you're delayed on getting comp plans out, you're delayed on getting those spiffs out, it creates a huge amount of inertia within the sales team and a lot of frustration. So it's not only like missing bookings targets, but people leave over it too. So it's one of those things that's truly in our control. But for RevOps, we know that we have dependencies on other groups. And so that's why we really want to invest in a clear calendar that everybody signs off with and hits the deadlines. And then the last piece I'll mention to that is just a little humility is, if we are orchestrating that process in RevOps, it can create the false security that, well, I'm the one who set these deadlines. If I miss them, it's okay. And I've done that. No, hold yourself accountable and have like an accountability partner with your team to make sure you hit those deadlines and escalate if you're behind.
No, George, and I think that it's good segue into executive alignment, because to roll out comp plans, they need to be approved. There's a cost assigned behind it, and finance need to be part of that as well. And generally, the CFO has got to be signed off, because this can, you can not have enough money to actually pay or the salespeople if you get those comp plans wrong, or overpay or so forth, and it can happen quite fast. But there's also, of course, other areas where you need all the execs aligned, because everyone's busy and everyone's got their priorities. So, and to have that strategic alignment across each of those areas is hard. And the one key way is to do that is to have executive alignment, so that the priority is set within the C-suite for their organizations, which then helps drive, and the things can then tend to move faster because everyone knows it's a priority. If planning is not on the priority list for one of these departments, you have a problem. And look, even if you're a smaller business, it's easy to get into a room and 4 or 5 of you can thrash it out quite quickly. But you'll find when you leave that room, if you haven't taken your notes, you'll find you come back 2 or 3 weeks later, and actually someone goes, well, actually, I didn't agree to that, or I thought it was something different. And it's really important to get that alignment, and that leads to transparency, so that you avoid silos in the process. Really, really important. I can't stress enough how important it is to get that executive alignment. And I think, George, I'll start with you, because if you think about the recruiting team, and it happened to me many times, we've got the plan, we've got all these heads we're going to hire. We even got finance to agree to front end load the heads. And we're in November, even December, and you go into HR, great. So we're already in the hiring plan. They go, what heads, what hiring? And it's just, you're now 3 months behind the plan, and that can literally make or break your plan just by not having HR and the recruitment team involved in the plan process earlier on. So George, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and I'll take a step back and say, what are we hoping to do? The vision here is, almost all of us are going to have a kickoff event. I like to call it a company kickoff event, or go to market, rather than just sales kickoff, because you can really be efficient, make sure everybody in the company knows your goals. Everybody wants to know like where you were, where you are today, and then where you're going in the next year, and then what their individual roles are and how it relates to that plan. And what you also want is all of your new hires to make that plan happen, hopefully are there at that conference. So if you're hiring people in Q1, you really want them to start in the first week of January so that they can be immersed in that. It creates way more efficiency. But if you think about the calendar and work back from that, you really need to have the recruiting team working with you early, and they need to see the first drafts of your capacity plan. And Werner has a lot of blog posts on this, like what goes into capacity planning, how it can impact how much revenue you can get in the next year. And what it all tells us is recruiting usually needs at least 3 months before you say go to when they have a butt in a seat. And so you really need to give them some working guidance on here's how many people we're hiring, what roles, where, and when we think they should start. And that's why you really want to tie recruiting's efforts into that plan, and you want to get their endorsement of the plan that says, yes, we can do this. And then ask them, well, what do you need from us? And invariably, it always comes down to, I need a rec signed off by the CFO by this date. And that's where it drives some really crucial and honest conversations. And I've seen it where if the recruiting team, whether it's people ops who owns that, or whether it's a separate team, if they are not part of your committee, you're going to have a huge capacity gap, because you're going to have a great plan with a nice bow tied around it. And then you're going to be scratching your head in April or May, wondering why you're behind, and it's because of your hiring.
Always happens in Q2 when you get this wrong. Exactly, George. And I think with that, Jeff, just examples of, how you've got executive alignment together and how it's worked for you.
So executive alignment for sure is going to have an impact on bringing in capacity, butts and seats. But there's also the element of timing, which is really important. So when you're going out and building out your plan, the two things that folks are looking for are, one, the right people, and then obviously that entails org design, role changes if needed. The second is going to be programmatic spend. So particularly spring and summer, though these are the best times to make sure that your live events for your marketing campaigns and your sellers are all lined up. And for many companies that are actually, hosting events themselves, that could be upwards of 9 to 12 months. It's like the biggest wedding you've ever planned. So, as an executive team, we want to make sure that we have all the ducks in a row lined up in terms of the discretionary budgets for which specific programs, and then lining up all the resources so that we can think through the calendar up ahead and line up all the marketing campaigns that surround it, live dinners, events, invites, executive sponsorships. And then on top of that, making sure that we have the right sellers in place to capture that demand. Because when you have longer sales cycles, if you're in the 180-day, 365-day sales motion, your first half is already cast on the second half of the previous year. So, you're trying to close business for this year, but you're also building pipe for next year. And while you're also planning, so, you're spinning 3 plates in the air, and it's a very difficult thing to do. So I can't stress enough how early, how important it is to start early.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And that, going on to the revenue strategy aligned with corporate strategy, it's a good link because it needs to be aligned. And this is, again, sort of leads into, being working in silos, where sometimes the corporate strategy is being set by the board and the C-suite, and they've got a plan on what they're executing, because you've got Horizon 1, 2, and 3. So they're 1 year out, maybe 2 to 3, and even a 5-year plan of where the corporate strategy of what's expected. But then you've got the revenue strategy, which is a bit more tactical of what needs to happen now, and in the next few months to up to a year. So there's that, it comes from the executive alignment. You've got executive alignment. You can be aligned more to that the corporate strategy of what's happening, and not get caught out by some decisions that are going to happen maybe down the road. Sometimes you just not allowed to know what those are, but at least have some indications of how you're going to be structuring your revenue strategy. And I think it sort of leads to communication in a way. But Jeff, I'm going to start with you just on, how have you, seen when you think about the revenue strategy of what the sales organization needs to do, and then you've got the corporate strategy, which is more broad across the organization on really fitting those two together.
So with revenue strategy, there are different regions, product lines, segments that your business might be engaged in. And so, you want to make sure that, your top line goal is not some monolithic number that you need to hit. It actually has goals broken down into the different buckets across the organization, because presumably you have, not a blended team or hybrid team. You have dedicated teams tackling those different segments of the market. So the more you can segment your business, the more likely it is for you to rally the right plan and the resources in place. And hopefully you're not putting just a base case down for your plan. You also have a couple of scenarios which allow you to determine, in the conservative outcome, this is where we could fall to the downside. And in a stretch investment scenario, this is where we are on the high side. Our executive team and founding teams are doing this all the time with their shareholders and their board members. And so we should be doing the same thing internally. And that gives us a sense of control, or at least an educated guess on the likely business outcomes for the following year based on, the math that we put together. On the corporate strategy side of the house, this really thinking about not just top line, but also what's the quality of that top line? What is the expense outlay? How do we design our org to decrease our customer acquisition costs, our cost to retain the dollar, and then our cost of expansion? When you talk to many businesses, or the folks that I've talked to at least, they have customer acquisition costs at the top level, but drilling down into different segments, the different motions, it gets much more difficult. And then also calculating those subsequent metrics, the cost of retention and the cost of expansion. You very hardly ever see businesses really measure those. And in today's age, we're seeing acquisition become much more expensive. Expansion is, the easy lever that folks want to pull, but it's not as easy as people think. So one thing we want to do is model, all of these out, and then have a narrative and scenario on as to, why we believe these specific hypotheses might play out.
And I think, Jeff, it leads into the world we're really in. It's about profitable, efficient growth and really understanding these metrics at that level. And when it's multidimensional, it's really, really tough. And it brings me back to the story again. When I was at Citrix, what we wanted to do was we had the hunter farmer model, but we can be more efficient if we move to a hybrid model. So we know hybrid is the most efficient to run. But it's interesting is we went and changed that whole revenue strategy, changed the whole org up to move to a hybrid model, not realizing that the impact of doing that would mean that a salesperson has now got renewals, upsell, and new business, that the salesperson tends to focus on maybe the bit easier work, which would be the renewals and the upsell, and you start losing on new business. And in any SaaS business that's out there, you start dropping in new business, you've got a problem that doesn't impact you maybe in the current year, you won't see it, but the next year you really see it. And it was a big lesson to be learned, is that you can drive efficiency, but you've got to be responsible about maybe understanding what the impacts are going to be and what could happen. So modeling out this data is really important. And I think, George, with that going, you've got an example that we spoke about with, there's different priorities when you're looking at from what the revenue engine needs to do or finance needs to do from an OpEx standpoint. So I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, the biggest problem I've seen, and this is especially in the smaller companies, is siloed activity and communication. In other words, CFO, CEO are talking, but even the CRO might not be involved, but certainly RevOps isn't. And I've been at, KLA was a great company I was with, and what they would actually do in the planning process, when I was just a manager level, and they would have us sign another insider agreement. I don't know why I'm getting congratulatory graphics in my background, but they would have us sign another inside agreement that just said, we understand the gravity of this information, how confidential it is. So if there's a concern, and this is a message to people from finance on the call, if there's a concern over the confidentiality and the sensitivity of the information, make sure you address that with RevOps, and anybody who's involved needs to know how confidential it is. but we also need to be involved because we're the mechanics, the plumbers who make this happen. And we can suggest usually the best strategy and the best tactics to achieve the objectives that Jeff highlighted for you guys. And so really think about how healthy your communication is between RevOps or between sales and the finance department, and break those down so that we know, and another example is finance is often doing scenario planning. Jeff mentioned like the aggressive plan, the likely plan, and the very conservative plan are the one where we need to be restrained. RevOps plans need to be lockstep with that, and don't be working outside of that. Otherwise, you end up putting together hiring plans that are focused on maybe expansion when it should be focused on new business, different things. And so breaking down those silos of communication really help everybody tie the strategy together across the org.
Agreed. And finance really should be your best friend. So we're going to go a bit faster through these last three, but equally as important. But don't get caught up in analysis paralysis. It's very easy to do. Super important to run your data. As you heard Jeff said, we've got to get more granular. We've got to understand the productivity data. We've got to understand our efficiency at a dimensional level, so that we can get more scientific about how we approach our planning process. But some of it is assumption led, and some of it you've got to go with the trend and data that you've got from the past to make that best decision on what you're going to do. So I think, George, just quickly, if you wouldn't mind, just when you think about when do you stop the analysis and say, hey, this is good enough. Well, we need to move forward here. Would love your thoughts on that.
Hey, Werner, really quick, sorry to interject here.
Yeah.
Before we get too far off the last topic, we had a question coming in the chat. It comes from Duran. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly, but does it become RevOps' job to seek out the gaps that are in both knowledge and relationships as well? I don't know if you can see. I know, Werner, you can't see your screen in the chat, but I can repeat that if you need me to.
And then, so sorry, the gaps in knowledge and
relationships
within the other functions, I'm guessing, or
I'm guessing,
departments.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, I'll let Jeff take that.
There you go. Yeah.
Gotta find the mute. All right. I think this question came in when you had mentioned the relationship with finance. So, this really comes down to a top-down and a bottoms-up reconciliation. So finance without a strong RevOps partner is going to run with a tops-down plan. They're going to do their best to build a bottoms-up as much as possible. And then with revenue operations, we're going to bring a lot of the context around, ability to generate pipeline, ability to progress that pipeline. And that's going to come in the form of deal velocity metrics. And then we're going to take a look at, some of the more headcount driven functions in your model. So the outbound pieces of your pipeline. Your pipeline is going to be constrained by your TAM and your market share. And if you nail that correctly, you can do it. But the relationship is critical. So, it's not necessarily a RevOps responsibility, but it is a shared responsibility across all planners within the organization. If you have a clear RACI matrix, everyone should theoretically know their place within the planning cycle. You don't have to try to reinvent. You don't have to invent the wheel. You have a game plan in place that's well thought out and structured and communicated to all the different leaders who own their specific part of the planning process.
Yeah, and Jeff, I mean, it is, just from my experience, I don't, when you're doing your plan, it's just, you've got to be lockstep with finance. And I look, if there's, sometimes it is hard and people don't get on, sure. But this is a business, and back to just the roles and responsibilities, you've got to figure it out and work it out, because if you're not lockstep, it's going to just be pushing water uphill. So, and if you want to be successful, and even into the analysis piece, I think Jeff said it really well, right? You've got top-down plans and you've got bottoms-up. The people that know the bottoms-up plans the best is the RevOps teams. You're dealing with the data every day. So leverage that. And I think, George, to that point, on accurate data and assumptions, just a quick, your thoughts.
Yeah, messages. It's always an imperfect process. We're always starved for a little bit of information. The modern day person I think of who was similar to Dwight Eisenhower was Colin Powell. He had a quote you guys might know about, hey, we go into battle with 80% of the available information, 80% confidence, knowing that you'll never get perfect. So using that calendar is a great way to avoid multiple cycles where you're coming back and forth. I saw one where literally we met 7 times just to talk about AE quota size and said, let's do it. What if we looked at it this way? And each time it came back to like another analysis. Have a strong leadership role. If you can't do it, enlist your CRO or somebody. Make sure you guys agree on this, that you need to have meetings where you evaluate it, you make a decision, stick to it. You can review it at a certain time, but don't leave it open-ended. And I think comp plans are one of those areas, and quota size is one of those areas where you can just spin tons of cycles. So tie it to a calendar, and that's a way to fix that problem.
And I think then going to, set and meaningful growth and efficiency targets, looking at that from, well, if we don't do it, what's bad? Well, there's confusion on the plan of record and well, what is the plan that we actually executed? Was it the high growth one? Was it the one that's most likely or so forth? But we've also got to be realistic. There's a certain sales productivity that a salesperson can produce at. And again, it's back to Jeff's point, right? Understand those data points, understand what your sales productivity is, understand what probably the efficiency needs to be. And if we understand those, well, then we can start to set meaningful targets, because what you don't want to do is start creating an unhealthy sales organization. And that can start to happen when you start to set things that just are out of whack, that don't make sense, because you're not looking, from looking up at that bottoms up operational data. It's driven from top down, and that's why that relationship and the communication between finance and RevOps it needs to be really tight, because then you will land in a place where you've got meaningful growth and efficiency targets. So I'll just, Jeff, any thoughts, on top of that?
No, I think you said it best. I think just want to leave time for the other examples.
Yeah, no, perfect. We'll go to the next one. So the communication plan. We should have bolded this, made this big across the screen, because everything we've spoken about needs to be communicated, and it needs to be communicated well. And with communication comes change management. And we must not underestimate the amount of change that happens whenever you're in an annual planning process, because that's what it is. We're changing, or you're planning for the future, and you're modeling things and scenario planning and so forth. So George, I'll start with you on communication.
Yeah, and I know we got to keep it moving, but don't do a weekly communication. Do it bi-weekly, quick, succinct, even if it's a few bullets to a broader set of stakeholders. Use your RACI on like, who should be informed of this? Here's what's going on with planning, and then highlight any key areas, any key alerts. If there's areas where you're behind, highlight that, and then maybe attach a tool like the calendar and where you are. But nothing builds confidence more with all of your stakeholders than really good communication. Don't leave people in the dark. You can do that, and then all of a sudden somebody else might step in and say, well, then I'm going to drive this plan. It's like the easy win for RevOps to take leadership. And if it's decided that, no, they don't want, finance or your CRO doesn't want you to do that, well, also make sure you're supporting who does, that they get it done too. But, don't have silence. Just, have simple bi-weekly communication. It keeps everybody aligned.
And Jeff, your thoughts.
Yeah, so to go tight to the planning piece that we skipped on a little bit, but board plan is at the base level, right? The company doesn't need to know your board target. Then there's the company plan. Almost everyone needs to know that because of the bonuses that may be out there. And so you're going to have a different level of oversight across all the different levers. Now, the communication cycle happens in 2 phases. One is in the planning motion. You want to have, either a biweekly or a monthly. You want to keep track of, here's where we are on our journey against our project plan. So you're essentially giving a program update on your planning motion. Then when the plan's complete, you have to communicate the changes to the org during your company kickoff. It's a perfect time to do this. So marketing has their plans, sales has their plan, customer success has their plans. Ideally, you have some sort of interlock or cross-departmental exercises to get everyone jazzed up. You have all of your enablement programs and your recertifications of the entire field ready to go. And then RevOps, if you have systems updates, communicate what are some of the major changes that are going to be had on the highway, right? Like you're going to be driving in the CRM, but you're going to notice a couple of lanes that are blocked off during different times of the drive, different times of the year. These are our sanctioned initiatives for the year. And obviously things might come along the way, but for the most part, you're trying to signal confidence to the org that there is a strong plan in place, and all we have to do now is execute.
Super important. Can't stress enough that communication plan and change management. And if you can't find, with the skill set required in comms, sometimes, I wasn't good at the comms side and communicating. I could put an email together, but to actually do the communications, like George was saying, bi-weekly, and Jeff's absolutely right. You've got to remember who needs to be communicated at what level. Then speak with the communications team. If you've got one, if you're a smaller company, there will be someone that can communicate within the organization. Say, hey, can you just help me with some comms, maybe half an hour, a week or whatever it is, and just put it together. So you get in it out. People are seeing what's happening, and it's also great leadership from that perspective. But if you want a good plan, you're gonna have to communicate. Okay, so best practices and checkpoints. There's always going to be multiple plans. We've had a number of conversations over the years of our models in Excel, and what version are we of the plan. I don't know, version 24 or 25, and what happened in version 2020, I can't remember. I mean, you make so many changes to it, but once the plan is locked in, lock it in, and really just understand that all the key stakeholders should be included. As we said, executive alignment. Everyone's got to agree and sign off, and of course finance have got the ultimate sign off that we're good to go and that we'll hit our operating margin targets and so forth, and of course the rule of 40 and to be there depending on how the segments and all that rolls out, but avoid too many sessions. You heard George say that you can have too many, it doesn't help. Be clearer. And of course, as we said, it leads to delays, domino effect, analysis paralysis. And then clearly outline those decisions that need to be made, and do it early on. You heard Jeff started at AWS in April. Be amazing to start in April. I know we want to start. We don't want to always be planning, but you always got to be planning, and you got to be thinking about it. It's part of the roles given how fast organizations move today. So with this, I'll George, if you wouldn't mind just running through on why these would be the key points. I wouldn't go through all of them, but just just trying to think about we started in August here, to get us to a kickoff in early January.
Yeah, Ross mentioned in the chat, we're going to be providing some templates and tools. One of those is a detailed planning calendar. I'd invite you guys to grab. But this is the key outputs and points. And I'd say the strongest thing to put in this is 3 executive checkpoints, meaning you've got CEO, CFO, CRO, or your head of sales, RevOps, and head of marketing, and then maybe a couple others. But that is one where you want to make sure these meetings happen, and you don't want more than that. And you want to make sure that the CFO and CEO know, don't go have meetings offline and reviews offline. Like, let's do it together. 3 seems to be the ideal for me to keep this moving and efficient and not have a ton of cycles. But make sure people know these are the key points. If you have admins supporting any of the executives, make sure they're tied into this and the importance of these deadlines and the preparation required for these. But there's a lot more points, but these are the key ones.
Thanks, George. And just talking about the RACI, I hope if you don't know, RACI has a good example one. And Jeff, if you wouldn't mind just saying a few words on why. I think we've highlighted it quite a few times, but just a quick and dirty of how you could put this together.
Yeah, I think a RACI is really important, obviously for top-down communication on who is responsible for what, but it also gives a forum for who gets a voice but not necessarily a vote. I think oftentimes when we're in planning, we can find ourselves with too many cooks in the kitchen. That's what creates a spin cycle throughout the organization and delays several major milestones. And so we want to make sure that, one, we do the work, we run with 70 to 80% of the information where possible, we get the right people in the room, and we notify the right folks downstream so that they can take that work as an input for their secondary set of work down the road. So those are things that I look for, why you have a RACE matrix, and folks clearly know, where they are within the process.
Hey, I'll bring back, there was a good question in the chat, Werner. I think it would be great for you to take on, how do we deal with the problem of 25 different plans? It's still a problem today.
No, it is. And I mean, I think that's where, we've got to be a bit more structured and automated. And I think it comes back to the status quo. We're used to doing a lot of manual work to do all this work, and it's difficult, and it's data pools and it's updates. And I think there needs to be more automation on how we do it. I think that's one piece. But it's getting to one source of the truth, that everyone's operating under the one plan. And I think that's where this falls down. Because, RevOps, we create our own bottoms up. So if we've got finance doing their piece, finance set what they think the productivity is based on what they're modeling. We don't factor in the ramp times or the onboarding that's actually happening. We know the onboarding program is going to drive something new. The enablement activities that we're doing, that all sits within RevOps, and so you start to get this disconnect that happens. So I think it's getting to that one source of the truth, getting all the right people in the room, so that you having this regular communication once a week, even twice a week. When you're doing planning, you should be getting together with all those right people in the room, and making sure that people who are going to be responsible for their parts of the data are. So I hope that helps answer it. But I think we certainly do need to get a bit more automated on how we do this, and the technologies are starting to come to be able to do that. Okay, so just deliverables. It's only got a couple slides left. Is again the financial plan and the budget. We've got to understand that. You got to know what budget you're working within. Sometimes you might not own the costs to it, but it's important to understand where they are, because you can't just go hire salespeople just to solve your problem. At Lative we talk about three pieces. You got your top down, which happens, which finance are going to give you a number and you're going to operate under. You're going to help you set your targets and your quotas and so forth. But you're going to have your bottoms up data that's coming, that's giving you all your, what's my productivity, what's my efficiency, what's my productive capacity. And the gap that you really need to solve for is either going to be solved through headcount. You're going to hire some heads, but you can't just hire as many as you want. It's going to be solved by attrition. Attrition is important to understand. Can we maintain and monitor our attrition, or at least hit our targets, or reduce attrition if it's too high? And then three is the strategic initiatives. So really important to understand that. And that really forms that forms your revenue strategy, which is your plan of record. Then really get into the sales and marketing capacity models. Really important to understand your sales capacity plan and model is going to be different to what the marketing capacity, because marketing is demand funnel. And what am I going to take of how many leads and so forth I need to generate versus inbound versus outbound, depending on how the organization is structured. Then getting more into the sales side, which is sales capacity and productive capacity and so forth. And that's feeding that on what you can then drive. And so big, I know we didn't really touch on this, and we purposely didn't because we could spend an hour on it, but systems, tools, and processes. This is what brings it all together. It's the glue of how you then operate that. Please don't ever forget about this. It's really important, because once you've done your annual plan, what needs to change in the systems? What does the workflows need to look like? And my advice is, please, just respect the admins and the IT teams, because going to them on the 15th of December saying, hey, I need all these changes made by 1st of January, it's going to take a bit, it doesn't always work. So involve one, again, back to the race, you have someone from the systems and tools and process team. If you own it, great, or someone in your team. But if you don't, bring someone in so they're fully aware of what's coming and what's going to be expected. Get set up on your annual plan and the kickoff plan. And really, your goal should be, as you kick off your fiscal, on that first day or that second day, have the quotas ready, have the comp plans ready, and the territories issued. And if you can do those three things, you've just had a successful planning process. And start there and work back of what needs to happen for you to hit those dates. So with that, George, I'll let you end it off with this quote.
No, I think Yogi Berra's got some great quotes. If you don't know where you are, you're going to end up someplace else. Captain Obvious, but it is the key. You know, everybody needs a plan, but before the plan, you need a plan for the plan, right? So we're talking about process here. We will follow up with a lot of tools and the inputs to help build out the plan over the coming months. But you know, start with a good framework that you can use this year, make it even better next year, and carry you as you continue to grow.
And Jeff, your words of wisdom.
Yeah, I sound like a broken record. Start early, build relationships, sell the why internally, why we need to start early. Just, you know, lessons learned from last year. A postmortem is always really helpful, but can't stress enough. A lot of the tools that we covered today, I think, are going to be helpful for you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think, is there any questions and still?
Yep. Thanks, Werner, always amazing. Great job. Jeff, George, thanks for jumping on and joining with us as well. And thank you to everybody for jumping on and walking through us for the last hour. There is a survey at the very end. We'd love to get your feedback and hear what you have to say. Also, Ross from Lative team has jumped and put some free templates and guides in the chat as well. If you didn't grab those or you missed those, please reach out to us or their team, and we will get those to you to help out. And I'm sure we'll be sending a follow-up as well. But thank you, everybody. That's it for us. We're a little bit over. So we'll see y'all next time. And panel, thank you. As always, y'all do amazing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.